What's up, everybody? Welcome to Game Dev Unchained, the #1 game development podcast about game development and the lifestyle thereof. Doing camera switch. This is your host, Brandon Pham, and this is a special episode, a Roundtable news episode, where we bring a panelist of game developers to share their opinions of the greatest and biggest piece of information, and we're going to break it down and see how it's relevant to game developers out there. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our panel over here and some familiar faces, right? So bam, this is how we see all three of us. So of course, on my right, we got Ray Graham. How you doing, Ray? Yeah. And then on my other side,
what's up, man? What's going on?
We got Richard Q. So I don't think you guys actually have ever met, but I know you guys listen to the podcast on a usual basis, so you know each other as being past guests before. So not going to bother with the introductions. So I'm just going to go right into the biggest meat of the last month. So with the year of 2020 kind of taking a turn, one of the biggest piece of news that has been affecting developers out there has been a return, or at least a bigger impact, about crunch culture. This is something that has been kind of headlining Gamasutra. I've been kind of seeing it kind of cropping up in all the news outlets as being apparently still a problem. So I kind of want to go around the panel. Like, has there really been a reasoning for this reemergence of talking about how crunch is bad again? All of a sudden, at least in my own view of things. So Ray, you want to go first?
Yeah. Well, yeah. I don't know if it was all of a sudden, right? Because CD Projekt Red and the whole cyberpunk delay has, I think, sprung forth more and more discussion about this again, because somebody that was on that team said, oh yeah, we're going to still be crunching to get the game done by, I think it's like, what is it, September, October?
Yeah.
And so everybody, I think that kind of spurred everybody to talk about it again.
Do you feel like overall, I think like the overall survey, there was like a state of the industry that everyone's kind of doing. Gamasutra has been doing one. I know EDGA kind of been sharing their news. And overall, at least the last couple of years, what I saw was there's been actually a decrease in overall crunchiness. So there's been an effect in the last 2 years where developers have been at least conscious of their rights as game developers, and maybe because of the a lot of the expose articles that's been kind of turning a light onto the game industry as a whole has been making an impact. Is this an assessment that you agree, Richard? How do you feel about it?
Well, actually, since you gave us a hint and said that you read the Gamasutra State of the Industry, I just sped read it. I think that, so for the people who haven't read it yet, like, what are the reasons you believe caused you to work those maximum number of hours a week, basically more than 40 hours? Self-pressure. I personally wasn't working hard, and I felt I needed / wanted to. I think like a lot of the video game industry still runs, and it will probably always run on the idea that this is an art form. You want to express yourself. You want to get your best stuff out there in front of players. When you think about a game like Cyberpunk with a ton of hype around it, and it's a large box priced game, like, you have people who really want to make sure that they get their stuff out there and it's the best that it can be. Whenever I read about articles of crunch like being bad, like the last one I remember was with Grand Theft Auto Rockstar, and yeah, that's another like big ass game that takes a lot of effort and energy, and you really only get like one big shot to make that super awesome first impression and to meet everyone's expectations around your game. So I definitely can relate to that. I think like that's a main reason why like 40 hours plus is still always going to be around. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. I mean,
Yeah.
what are you saying, Ray?
No, I'm saying part of it, like, yeah, so some people would like to believe that it's just, I want to get my best stuff out and I need to work harder to get my best stuff out, right? But like when you're on a team like that, even when I saw the same the state of the industry survey where it's like, oh, it's self-pressure, it's I want to do it, right? A lot of times it may feel like that, or you may tell yourself that, but you know, at the same time, it's you want to make sure that you're pulling your weight on the team and everybody else is there late. There's nobody to tell you to go home. There's also somebody telling you that, or somebody setting the schedule up in such a way where in order for you to get your best stuff out, you have to crunch, right? Rather than setting it up in such a way where you can have a time to polish and have a regular work-life balance and still produce high quality stuff, right? Like people always use like, yeah, we always want to cram more stuff in and make it great, right? But that's where the management and the people running the teams need to be like, nah, this is good enough. All right. Or put time in to get that polish in, right? So that people don't have to kill themselves.
Yeah, I mean, to add to that, like, I totally agree. Like, so I think it's on both sides. Like, the people are willing to put in the hours. Like, I don't know how many, I don't have any stats off the top of my head, but like, how many of the people who are crunching, like what age are they? Like, is this their first game? I mean, you can look at the people themselves, but ultimately it does come down to how the team is managed, how the schedule is set up. Like, is there time to polish? Is there time to accurately estimate how long any major task is going to take? Since I shifted to like indie stuff and I'm working with my family, I need to make sure that it's like really tightly scoped to keep that work-life balance going. And it's given me a lot of empathy towards understanding precisely how much time is needed for a feature to get done. And I don't think that in larger corporations, like that much attention can be given across the entire project. So I'm not saying it's anyone's fault, but it's definitely like how like people want to give their best effort, but also just like, you know, do they have enough time to do it and are they overtasked?
Yeah, I think at least my measure by default with crunching is that anything more than 5 people, it becomes a choice. Because essentially when you're working with a large team, there's a lot of gates in place to kind of prevent problems with delay of game or quality stuff not getting in, right? To me, it becomes more about peer pressure and bad planning than actually trying to push this game that is so close to being the best, right? It's not about a ledge. And so my understanding with that and my, you know, there was a certain point in my career where I just said no, right? Just like straight up Neo, just looking at them and said no. And a lot of that is because of experience, but just not wanting to be taken advantage of and fall into the peer pressure of things. And so I just see the long game of crunching. Someone's I'm hearing myself repeating, but like, yeah. Isn't my voice enough, Richard? So so with crunching, I think essentially I think we all agree, right? With smaller teams, because there's so many factors, so many variables at hand that you're juggling with many disciplines at once, and you're essentially maybe working on this game for the first time as a group, that it's hard to account for all things. And with larger teams, until we fix that problem where a 5-year game is actually being made the last 2 years or last year, I'm not crunching the first 3 years of this 5-year development. No, I mean, it's most of these games that get delayed. Like we were talking about Cyberpunk, right? That game is essentially just being locked down the last 2 years of development. There was a lot of high ranking officers kind of leaving at pretty much right after the first trailer announcement was made, right? A lot of high departures being made shortly after that because the game was nothing but like an idea, right? It wasn't fully fleshed out and there were problems already happening. So you guys can speak on this, right? You guys have been leads of major games. Most people kind of stick to the end just to get that credit. But for you to leave before the game is out and allegedly it's getting a bunch of hype, right? It usually means because of production problems that you just don't believe in or agree with the creative control of what's happening with the project. It's not because it's super tight. At least in most of the cases, correct?
Yeah, like for a game like Saber. Sorry.
No,
There's
go ahead.
A delay, so I don't know if you were. Oh yeah. All right, so I was gonna say it was like I think like games like that which have a lot of hype to it. I mean, so much of like what you have to do when you like manage a product like that is like hype it up, and you need to get people excited about it. You need to get people to get invested into it. Like way back then, like pre-sales mattered, but now it's a much different like sort of market that doesn't matter as much. But you still want to stand out. You know, the industry is only getting larger and larger, and there's still more money that goes into these games. People are spending more. Like the just the spending patterns of like consumers is like always just like increased over time. For a game like I haven't like done like a full analysis on this, but I think like if you were to like make a checkbox of like things on a product that would contribute to crunch, I think stuff like, how long has it been in development? How is it a new IP? Like how much like content is being promised and stuff. I mean, I think there's a correlation that you can draw. I mean, it's not like, these companies are actually thinking about like how their product is similar to other big products and how should they scope their stuff differently. So I think like a lot of these like jam ups that you see with big delays like for Cyberpunk and even like Final Fantasy VII Remake, these things like are just part of the game industry. And like, you never know, like sometimes it's like, sometimes it's not the development team's fault. Maybe they've got to wait for things like gold masters or regulations or other geopolitical stuff. Like, who knows? Like, there's definitely reasons for these delays, and sometimes it's due to poor planning. And I would like to say that most of the time it's not because of that, but you never really know.
Well, I mean, crunch, I think we're always going to be crunching, to be honest. Although there is a decrease over time, even the state of the industry is saying that most people are still working over 40 hours on average, even if it's 2-3 hours over or whatever, it still counts, right? It just starts with upper management, especially with these AAA studios. As you guys can imagine, the more successful they are with crunch, the more likely they're going to keep that inside because it's working, right? Yeah. But let's move on. I want to move on to like an update of status with. The best way to kind of talk about this is Stadia, right? So. I think we made some predictions and everyone kind of had like an idea that Stadia was going to be a flop, right? That it's not going to be as exciting as everybody wanted it to be. I mean, we had hopes that it would usher this new era, but essentially we're still kind of having like this very slow start to it all. And Google, if anything, there was like a whole Reddit forum dedicated to how quiet they've been on updates and what's going on with the system, and all these early adopters, which we'll just call them suckers, for believing into the system. Essentially, they didn't see it coming. They trusted into.
I have to know. I have words for you, but continue your point.
Okay. But Richard, you don't know Ray's background, but a lot of his friends is kind of heading this division at Google right now. A lot of ex Ubisoft, was it Toronto people over there, kind of taking control. So Ray, do you want to kind of speak on behalf of their sins? Or I mean status. No, man. I meant status. Status.
Man. No, man. I think I actually have Google Stadia in the house. I actually have it here.
Right. Firsthand experience.
Yeah, and I've played it, and I've played it over a Wi-Fi connection, and it's good.
Okay.
Right. It's good for what it is. It's good for what it is. Right. And it's like, oh, this is cool. The problem with Google Stadia right now is there's just no games. And the games that are there are games that you could play on any other system. And there's no real reason, if you're a gamer, there's no real reason to play it on Google Stadia, because you either have Xbox, you have a PS4, you have a PC. You could play any one of those games on any one of those devices, right? So there's no reason for you to get a Stadia, right? What they need to work on is the things that separate Stadia from regular games, right? And they really need to focus on that. And quite frankly, they just got started on that stuff late, right? So it's going to be a while before you see any of those games come out. And so it's just a matter of, can they maintain the stuff while those games come out? And then there was that whole article where they basically said, well, it's up to the publishers to announce the games, right? But like, and everybody was like, yeah, that makes sense. But no, it doesn't, right? Because you're the platform builder. The platform is supposed to be hyping up the platform so that people will want to announce their games on the platform, right? And so like they're really falling down on the whole publishing side of things and actually getting games on the platform. Platform is like, it's decent. It does what it's supposed to do, right? And then there's some features that they've announced that really set it apart, but there's no games that are really using those features right now.
Right. It's I mean, they're treating gamers like they've never heard announcements before. I mean, like it was literally at E3 when they announced their Stadia, right? And it's the Sony and Microsoft and Nintendo announcing games. And so it's not like, of course, Ubisoft and all these guys have their own conference, but essentially you're going to a Sony thing to kind of figure out what's an exclusive or what's so impressive about their individual ecosystem that I need to buy in. But before I kind of move over to Richard real quick, can you break down, Ray, how much money you wasted on that? Like the pricing system is what's confusing to me, because I think everybody bought into the idea because they're like, oh, $10 and then I can just play whatever. I think that's the lie,
but
right?
That's not true.
That's not true.
Yeah, that's not true, right? And first of all, it was a gift, so I didn't pay the $130.
Oh, no wonder you're not jaded.
Somebody else paid the $130, right? Secondly, I think I'm still on the free 3 months that you get with it of Pro, right?
Right.
And with that Pro thing, you get a free game, or there's some games that you get for free with the Pro, and then you also get a discount on some of the full price games if you're a Pro member or whatever, right? And that Pro subscription is what gets you 4K resolution at 60 frames and all of that, right? But if you wanted to pay no money, I don't know if they've rolled that out yet, but there is going to be a free tier that they roll out where you just get 1080p at 30 frames, and it's a free tier, and you just pay full price for the games. We talked about this before, and I think paying full price for the games is the only way that you could make sure that the content creators get any money out of this.
Do you have any inside scoop of how people are getting paid? Because they've been very secretive about that. Yeah.
No, but I mean, I think it's obvious. If you're paying $60 for a full game, they're going to take some sort of cut, and the developer gets the rest. But if you're doing it like Netflix, where you pay $12 a month and you get unlimited games to play, the value proposition of putting your game on a system like that diminishes really quickly, unless you're getting a large amount of money up front.
Yeah, that's the Netflix model. Right. They pay for the license.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that doesn't work for content creators, I think, in the video game space. So the only way to do it is to charge full price. But then to charge full price for a game that I could play on my Xbox that I actually have the disc in my hand, for some folks, that's not good, right? However, I think streaming is here to stay. Like, I think there is a future, like, NVIDIA is doing something right now. Microsoft is beta testing xCloud. Like, as much as we want to hate, I don't think this is going anywhere.
Yeah. So I'm going to switch it over to Richard. What are your thoughts about all this so far?
I think you hit the nail on the head. I think that the pricing model is really quite. I think it is what it has to be now, until like stuff gets like figured out, like what exactly makes sense for people, like, because frankly, like when I hear like, oh, I need to pay more money in order for like I have better like 4K resolution or whatever, like people haven't made those kinds of like pricing decisions since like for a long time, in my opinion. Like I remember like over a decade ago, I would care about like what say processor I use, like, oh, I had a Pentium 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or whatever, and then thinking about like, oh, does my broadband actually support this like game playing at a resolution, playing, you know what I mean? Like that stuff is not what people are used to, especially because like, you know, PCs, the technology is like tabled off in terms of like how powerful it has to be and like what you get out of it. And then like, you know, the consoles are always really strong, and you know the iPhone is already pretty good and Android's good. So I think once that becomes a little bit like more stabilized, I think that'll be easier for people to understand what the value prop is. Like if you asked an average like hardcore gamer, like, you know, how much does it cost to do Stadia, you know, like when people don't know how to compare apples to oranges, then it's going to be really tough. And I say apples to oranges because, like, you know, the biggest complaint with Stadia is like no games are exclusive, but then at some point there will be exclusive games. I was actually trying to find during your chat just now, like what games are going to be coming out exclusive, but I guess like if it's an exclusive, they're not going to reveal it till later.
Yeah,
they don't know yet, man. The truth is that they're scrambling for one.
Well, there's two exclusive games. Yeah. There's 2 exclusive games right now, but still, like, 2 exclusive games are not very interesting. Doesn't matter, right?
Yeah. I think that cloud is definitely here to stay. I've always felt, and like people I've worked with, like have heard me say this before, like, but the best game would be the kind that you can like take anywhere with you, play on PC or play on mobile or play on console, and then depending on like, you know, you design game systems that sort of engage you for like sitting down for 1 minute or playing for half an hour, and then you could just take that experience anywhere with you. I'm still not sure exactly what that game looks like, and one of the biggest advantage, like what that game would look like with cloud, because one of the biggest thing about cloud is that you have like this awesome processor, and then the fidelity of the graphics is awesome, and you can take it anywhere with you. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the gaming fidelity, the fidelity of like the graphics and like the FPS isn't necessarily the thing that you need in order to play a game that you would play everywhere. You know, like I feel like those kind of games already exist on mobile, so I think it's a tough niche to sort of like carve out, but it's definitely like the way of the future. Like for sure, it's not going to go anywhere.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Yeah. I like the fact that I'm able to kind of play my games remotely. I've been playing with Steam remote, just being able to kind of. Oh, you don't like that? I love it, dude.
That shit don't work. It literally does not work. And especially if you're going over Wi-Fi, it does not.
No. I haven't played it through over Wi-Fi.
Trash.
It is trash over Wi-Fi.
Absolutely trash.
Sure,
absolutely trash.
I agree with you, but. I like the idea of not having to be in front of my PC. Like I can stream from at least my PC to my TV and I'm already happy. But this is kind of leading into the GeForce Now, the $5 a month subscription, right? There's no hidden weird Google Stadia, buy this freaking thumbstick for $120. All right, Ray, you got it for free. So you don't know the pain that people are going through right now, but you have to pay like $120 to kind of get into playing Google Stadia, which the hardware itself doesn't really justify it. But with GeForce Now, right, which is really interesting, is that it actually goes through and supports all your Steam account, your Epic Games account, Battle.net, and Uplay. So if you have any games that you own on those platforms, you're able to play it over Wi-Fi and remotely. So that's what GeForce Now is. This correct, right? I'm reading through this, and this is how far. So you're not just buying games in this Google Stadia, then that the catalog is kind of owned separately. It's combining everything you've owned so far on PC and able to finally deliver what we all thought Stadia would be. What are you guys' thoughts about that? $5 a month. Versus Google.
Yeah, that's the first that I'm hearing that they're combining all your different services. So I think that's pretty dope. Yeah. And the other thing I'm noticing here is RTX on. right? So they're going to be hyping up that for a while, I'm sure. And I'm sure they have to use all of the ray tracing cards that nobody's buying. So that's a good way to do it. But yeah, I guess that's cool.
And I kind of believe
it goes back
GeForce.
to like what I was saying earlier. It's like, how is this like, what's different about how I sit down and play this versus Stadia? Because like what you just described, it already sounds like that's better, but this is part of like the confusion I have. It's like, wait, so I can play the games that I already play cheaper, but anywhere? Like, is that the value prop still? Like, I think it's hard for me just as a, like, not at the bleeding edge to fully understand what I'm getting here.
Yeah, but the idea is just taking your games from your PC and being able to play on your Android, right? Or your iPhone. Okay. I think everybody just wants that opportunity to kind of move away from their PC and just take their library with you. And that's why one reason why the Switch is so attractive to a lot of people is that you're able to kind of have that. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a fundamental difference though between the Switch and like these things, right? Like, yeah, everybody's like talking like, oh yeah, you can play on your mobile device, right? As long as you have this clunky, big Bluetooth controller to play it with, because of course not every game is going to have touch controls, right? So now you're on the go with an Xbox controller and some sort of stand that you'll put your phone in and you'll be on the bus playing this thing, right? And then the Switch is made to be portable. Like that's what it's made to do, and it just makes way more sense to be portable with it. You know what I mean? And and then it can be docked at home, and right. So like the whole like playing these cloud games on your phone, I understand the attractiveness of it, but the practicality of it is like lost on me. It seems stupid.
Right.
Right.
No, I just feel like Switch is like the closest to achieving this. Like Nintendo's next system is probably going to hit this the best because everyone is still kind of hanging on to their hardware. Google is trying to kind of get your private information through their service. It's not a game first. So everyone has an agenda besides playing on a mobile device, right?
Is there any like stats out there that says like how popular like cloud streaming is across the world? Because I would like bet that it's more popular outside of the United States than it would be in the United States, just because I think that the idea of turning your phone or any mobile device into a really powerful like a console quality gaming platform is slightly more attractive for people, like for more mobile centric countries like Asia. That would be my guess, but I'm just kind of wondering.
Yeah, the thing is, like, I've been dealing this space a little bit in Asia with the game market in Asia, and they don't care at all about the consoles.
It's all about internet, right?
Yeah,
it's all about internet and mobile and social connections.
Yeah, they don't care about the consoles at all, right? And of course, they want there's some mobile games out there that look beautiful and are really pushing the mobile devices hard. But when it comes to like, I want Xbox One on my phone, like I don't think they care at all. They just want to be able to play the game and see the numbers go up and play with their friends, and that's it.
Yeah, I'm looking at the global availability of this GeForce Now service, and I'm guessing that they did their marketing research, but it's making it available for North America, of course, Western Europe, Russia, Japan, and Korea. That's their main focus right now. Not even China, bro.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Yeah, because those are the countries that have like most console like availability, PC penetration. Yeah.
Seems like it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So at least that's what they're aiming for. It's going to be a couple years, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. As soon as you said Russia, I was like, yep. Like PC players. Like, people that play PC.
Yeah, it makes sense because they're combining all the PC services, right? Epic, Steam, Battle.net, Uplay, right? Those are all the PC markets. So they're targeting the library.
And the one cool thing about all the streaming services, like beyond all the problems that we're outlining, the one cool thing is hardware upgrades. right? Like you just get hardware upgrades for free as time goes on. They'll just replace the GPUs, upgrade them, they'll get faster and better over time. Stadia, Nvidia Now, Xbox, it'll all happen for all of those services.
All right. That sounds cool. All right. So this is a topic that I was kind of thrown. No, I agree with you, man. Like having a cloud-based game, not worrying about hardware, is the biggest appeal. It actually kind of scares me if it is becoming a publicly accessible type of service. Well, it is accessible, but like publicly interested type of service. I don't know how that's going to affect game development, like telling game developers essentially they don't have to worry about anything. It's going to be wild.
Game developers are still going to have to make their games. They're still going to have to make it to certain hardware. It's still going to have to be performant. It's still going to have to run fast. Mm-hmm. Like to game developers, it's not much of a difference. I think the more of the difference is to the users, right? And their bandwidth caps and LTE bandwidth and 5G bandwidth and availability of all that stuff when you're not at home. And I think it's a worse experience.
Yeah.
Right. But then it's a matter of, do you want to trade the convenience for that worse experience?
Answer is yes. Dude, I'm all about convenience, dude. I'm all about convenience, man. As soon as I was playing my Metal Gear 5, dude, I was playing that over Christmas on my phone. I was the happiest kid in the world, man. Just being able to
wait. Can I just ask,
Yeah.
So I can tell that you like your cloud gaming. Why were you playing Metal Gear 5 on your phone?
Because I was playing.
I'm honestly curious.
Because I like spending time with my family, man. So as the kids are trying to play with their train set, right, I was sitting there with my game.
I mean,
watching them.
I mean, you could also just be doing that with a Switch, right? Like,
you can't play Metal Gear 5 on the Switch, dude. There's certain games that isn't available on the Switch.
You're right. You can play better games on the Switch.
Kojima felt that one.
Oh man!
All right, so I'm gonna talk about the next one. This one's kind of I think it hits home once in a while. We all get into like a little. Let me see. I think we're a little stuck here, at least for me. How am I going?
Yeah, my nose was stuck on screen for a bit. It was pretty upsetting to look at.
It's good now. It's good now. Yeah.
All right. So I'm going to leave it on Richard while I fix my camera. But
okay.
My question, Richard, maybe you can answer this first, right? Gaming saturation. It's becoming crazier and crazier out there in the market. We just had Victoria on, right, a few weeks ago, and she was telling us about how the week before we had her on, there was 170 games that were released on Steam within a week, right? And this is kind of becoming the average now every week. And it's getting hard for us out there to stand out as game developers. It's also getting harder for gamers to kind of notice the type of games that they usually like, right? It's actually asking them to do more work. What's your feeling on that? It has to deal with the age groups that they're trying to target, but also finding the right game is just becoming a lot tougher on both sides.
I think that the industry is always going to keep expanding. I think that as game developers, like the collective consciousness will figure out ways to hit on niches that you haven't really thought of before, how to appeal to certain demographics that haven't been appealed to before. I'm just talking in generalities. I think you're talking about saturation within certain bands of target audience. So I think in general, the number of games that are going to come out is always going to increase. I think I read some article somewhere that people over 50 are not a tapped audience yet. And I could actually see there being many games that try to appeal to gamers who are 50 and up. I myself am going to turn 50 and up at some point, and I would love to have games that are more, I guess, mature or whatever, right? But getting to your point, I think that it is going to get harder and harder for game developers to sort of stand out. As an indie developer, I think that the challenge is it's actually kind of a welcome thing for me. I don't really think about how many games are coming out like every year. I just try to make sure that like I've thought through like all of my product planning. I've thought about like what people kind of want to see in the future, you know. I really don't know where all these new games are coming from, like what type of new games are coming out. Is it mostly on console or is it mostly on PC? Is it mostly indie? I'm not quite sure. But you know, to me, it's like nice to hear that like people are always like willing to like make games, and like it really does help push the entire industry forward. But yeah, you know, like we kind of talked about this at the beginning of your podcast that like, yeah, you know, like that additional pressure, that desire to stand out is going to lead to like, you know, developers like overworking themselves, and like producers and executive teams wanting to go over the top, and that's going to lead to overtime and whatnot. So whatever.
How about you, Ray? Like you're meeting with a lot of these types. So you're part of the problem, but I'm also want your opinion about. I mean, what realistically? I feel like it's increasingly becoming this, right? A lot more gamer, or at least awareness, are becoming game developers. A lot more accessibility to actually go out there and present your ideas to the world. And so I don't really see it slowing down as much.
Yeah, I see it as a good thing, though. I see it as a good thing for, I think, lowering the bar for entry and letting all voices be heard is a good thing, right? You know, I'll make it about race and diversity a little bit, where like underrepresented creators, it opens the door for them. You know what I mean? Being able to make games easily and cheaply, right? But then when it gets to the point of like trying to capture the public's attention and be selling games, like I think that's just media right now, right? Like if I go on Netflix right now, I have nothing but choice of what movie to watch. I have nothing but choice of what video game to play. I have nothing but choice for what book to read, what music to listen to. There's just so much content being produced generally across all segments of the entertainment industry. But that just is a sign that it's growing, and competitions will get fierce. And it also means that people are going to really be making good stuff so that they can stand out.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. Yeah, I agree with both of you. I think overall is a great thing that people are having a lot of choices, and it just comes down to the individual or your team to kind of really appeal to their audience and just bring it upon their shoulder. And as long as it's fair competition, I think everything's all game and fun.
It's not fair competition. You already know that.
Well,
you know,
fair enough that if you really
the money, right? You get noticed.
Sure, but I think there's enough on both sides that you can hear at least once in a while, like a game that is a sole developer is able to kind of break it through. As long as you keep hearing stories like that, it gives you at least an ounce of hope. If it's just like Call of Duty every year and Battlefield every year, that's dominant. Well, they are dominating the headlines. And that's all you hear year round, then I think it is pretty hopeless for the little guy to make it through. But I think last 2 years, or increasingly so, we're starting to hear more and more about these smaller teams just prevailing through all that and actually providing a nice contrast for the gamers to kind of choose from.
Well, what I'm hearing, what I see is like, smaller indie teams, right? But a lot of those smaller indie teams are backed by indie publishers that have 10 other games under their belt, and they have the connections to get all the websites to pay attention to these indie games and hype them up.
Don't be hating, man. Don't be hating, man. That's good homework.
I mean, I'm not hating at all. I'm not hating at all, but let's just be real.
Ray's 100% right. I mean, part of like what since the last time I was on the show, Brandon, and talking about doing indie dev, like, you know, I'm gonna be talking to Victoria like in a couple days about like marketing on a $0 budget, and then reaching out to a couple publishers to help out with marketing, and I'm gonna talk to someone else that I know to help out with like doing Kickstarter, and then, you know, it's like, you know, as Ray said, like that a lot of that comes intuitively to me because I've worked in the industry in big corporations. So I just know like, hey, you need like a marketing budget behind it. And I think that yes, there's more games coming out, but that doesn't mean that I'm going to do things any differently. I still think that if you are smart with how you do things, if you use your resources wisely, if you use your connections wisely, you can stand out. And there's a part of me that always believes, at least this is my thesis on doing R&D game, that focusing on quality of the experience and then doing the right steps and then maintaining, like building your brand as a studio as being like honest and transparent and that you're trying to deliver good value should work. I hope it does. But yeah, you're right. Like there's also unfair competition out there that like part of the reason why I do indie is to slide under it. Like I'm not going to try and fight like Blizzard or Riot toe to toe. There's absolutely no way that that's going to happen. Maybe like 15 years ago you could, but there was kinds of like, you know, like you said, the market's saturated and people have figured out like pretty much almost every monetization model out there with like, you know, even just like the data that helps you point and predict to the next monetization model. By the way, that's subscriptions. It's those are things that like people are just more aware of nowadays than it was like a while ago.
Mm-hmm. And if anything, it just brings better decisions made by game developers. And I mean, the games that do get at least across to a wide swath of gamers. I mean, we're just getting higher quality products, to be honest. It's no more like GarageBand games that because you know what I mean?
I still think GarageBand's fine actually. It's just that you have to come up with something that like
a marketing strategy at least.
Yeah, you need to stand out. No matter what kind of game you are making, you have to make sure that you have a very clear point of view. It's still creative art form, in my opinion. Like, you know, if you make something crappy, people aren't going to want to play it, you know, like, so that's, you know, like, that's what I'd like to believe.
Mm-hmm.
But I will say though, if you're competing and for quality and you're doing higher quality stuff, I think inevitably also the cost goes up.
Yeah.
Right. And so also the folks got to be willing to pay $25 for an indie game.
Yeah. And it should be that way, man.
It should be that way, but so many games get like just skewered because it's like, oh, you want me to pay $25? Right. But if it's high quality and you know, people got to eat and things cost money, right? So we have to be willing to pay those kind of price points.
Yeah, I mean, my feeling is that as long
as I'm trying to, oh, go on.
No. What are you trying to say? I'll finish after.
Oh, I think that honestly, trying to for the game we're making for Mage Hunter, we're trying to figure out, should it be $15? Should it be $20? Should it be $25? $25 feels like it's too much. Do a lot of research on Steam Spy. Just like look through my own library and just like do a rough calculation of like, how much money did I spend for this? You know, and then like you have to also think about like how much money you're trying to make, what kind of like quality bar you're trying to go out there, because like the more money you spend for a game, it's always got to be a higher quality. Like that's as fundamental of an economic rule as like gravity is for like physics, although gravity is just a phenomenon that happens. But anyway, we're not talking about physics. So anyway,
I'm not talking about physics. You guys can talk about it.
I would love to talk about physics. Level 6, baby. Anyway, for me, like part of like trying to figure out the price point for our indie game is like, we can't just make it for like, you know, a couple bucks, because like we have to stand out. And like those cheap games that are out there, like, you know, I myself would be doing myself a disservice if I didn't try my hardest to put something out there that was high quality, and, you know, the time it takes and the opportunity cost of working on this kind of game. And, you know, just, the costs go up 100%, as Ray said.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And I'm a big fan for developers kind of putting the price that they feel like they deserve. Like I think I've read this a couple places where developers, at least indie developers, tend to kind of underprice their product more than usual. And, you know, it doesn't have to be that way. I think if you've built up a niche base, have a dedicated fan that likes legitimately your game, they would be willing to pay whatever the price to kind of just make sure they play your game and support you. Yeah.
Wait,
$1 million.
No, but you said a dedicated fan, like one singular person, right?
Bro,
but
this is what I'm learning, man. It starts with one dedicated
$1 million.
fan.
One dedicated fan that gives you $1 million, and then you're just like,
finding
sure,
one.
good.
See, I think a lot of developers kind of get lost of trying to get like 10,000 people at once, but it starts with 1 to get to 2 to get to 4 to get to 6. I still believe that. Yeah. Like if you can appeal to one dedicated person, the likelihood of that spreading and getting that person to talk about your game gives you a formula to work with to kind of decide how to actually roll out your marketing strategy. But that's wrapping up that topic. I want to kind of spend a little time before we end this podcast on VR, right? So the last roundtable news we've done, which is a while ago, VR to me was dead. It was like just Facebook's little experiment that Zuckerberg is just grasping for straws, right? Because everything else is failing over there. But since then, the Quest has become very profitable. So profitable that Facebook posted that it made up for 2% of their profits last year. 98% is still advertising, but this is different from the year before for Oculus, where they were talking about how they were spending more money on advertising than at actually selling through. So their Quest system is doing well, and of course, the biggest news I felt like the last few months was Half-Life Alyx, right? That was the first legitimate game that people were willing to shelf out money. Oh, you're shaking your head. But Valve sold out their stupid VR system that I was laughing about, right? Sold out, right? And people are lining up to play Half-Life Alyx. In the last couple of months since Half-Life Alyx, The Walking Dead is getting a lot of buzz right now. And Boneworks is another game within months of each other has been causing a lot of stir. All right. Ray seems super angry at me. So go ahead and share your thoughts.
No,
it's not buying it. This guy literally has everything.
I think it's the typical. I think it's the typical bias of like only high quality games matter.
Yeah.
Right. And because Half-Life Alyx looks good and it's in the Half-Life universe. Oh, finally a VR game that I want to play because it looks great, right? But I could guarantee you that Beat Saber probably has more.
I can tell that you're going to talk about Beat Saber. All right, I have Beat Saber, right? It was a fun party game.
That's also why Oculus Quest is being successful as well, right? Because it's removing some of the barriers, has cool ass games on it. Right, that don't look like Half-Life Alyx, right? And it's about the games, right? And I remember I saw you when Half-Life Alyx was announced. I saw you mentioned you're like, oh, finally a VR game worth playing, right? Just because it has some higher resolution textures and some lighting, like you're all of a sudden super excited about it, like.
Quality game design, man. Come on, man. Come on, man. You know how, first of all, do you know how many pent up game designers there are at Valve, right? They've been like fuming the last 8 years. And so they're like unloading finally a worthy game that they're releasing. Well, their last game was what? Portal? Left 4 Dead 2? What was it? Dota doesn't count. That card game doesn't count.
Portal's a dope ass game. Artifact was a flop, right? But anyway, like I'm just pointing out that there's a ton of good VR games out there that you can play on Oculus Quest. They're good, right? And even some on PSVR that are good, right? Just because it has Half-Life in the name and it looks nice doesn't mean it's the first legitimate VR game, right? That's all I'm taking offense to. All
right. While you're taking offense to that, I'm going to go over to Richard, right? I'm going to talk to Richard here in the corner. So, I mean, like, for me, right, every system has that exclusive game that everybody... That appeals to a hardcore gamer, right? The Sony system, the Microsoft system, the Nintendo system, the PC system, right? The one that kind of takes off is usually an exclusive game that appeals to core gamers, at least in my opinion, right? And to me, Beat Saber was not it. I'm not ready to hang my coat on that game as being the best VR game.
What's the core gamer? What's the core gamer market for the Wii?
The tennis
game we're working for the Wii U, right? Like, come on, man. Like, it's clearly a
wait. Are you bringing up the Wii U as an example of a good system? What were you saying?
No. I'm bringing up as an example of a system. Yeah, I'm bringing up an example of a system that doesn't really appeal to core gamers, but still makes some money out here in these streets, right? And that's the thing. I think it's a misnomer to always gauge the success of everything by the core gamer market, right? Because sometimes it ain't about them.
All right, I'll give you the Wii. But come on, even the Switch, people are talking about Zelda, right? They're not talking about that. Oh, I wonder where that tennis game is, or that bowling game. No one's talking about.
If you look at Zelda's not even really like that good looking of a core game, right? It's just a good game.
Yeah,
good game systems. Good.
All right, then our definition of core gaming is kind of. I think we have a miscommunicated. To me, core gaming is not highest quality graphics.
It's not Call of Duty. It's not Call of Duty, right? Yeah.
No, I'm talking about just people who've been dedicated to games the last 5+ years, right? We've been playing games on a consistent level, right? Beat Saber kind of brings a bit about everybody, you know, and in the living room that sees it for the first time. I want to try that, sure, but that doesn't qualify as a hardcore gamer because it's, you know, with Zelda, it's like, hey, there's a history of Zelda players that heard about Zelda and want to keep playing. See, to me, that's a hardcore gamer. That's a guy that's been around.
But also in that context too, like if you expand it out to the global context of video games, right? Like the core gamer ain't nothing, right? Like, in the grand scheme of things, right? So that's, you know, I think always measuring success by that is always like,
fine.
Like, nah, don't do that.
All right. I'm promising you, I'm not gonna let Ray have the last round. So I say this one thing before I bring it to Richard. All right, the phone is brought in by casual players because most people have phones that don't play games. Fine. As soon as this VR actually has glasses, peripherals, kind of like what Richard is wearing right now, that people can have other functionality, right? It still is a core device. It's a hardcore device. That's the main problem they're trying to break right now, right? And so for me, it's a disservice to kind of not focus on that hardcore group before moving on and doing something else like Beat Saber 2 or something. All right, Richard, your thoughts on VR as a game designer.
All right, as a game designer. Well, today I learned that your definition of core gamer is very different than what my definition of core gamer is.
We all have all different definitions, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's just it's a question of like, you have to say core gamer as in hardcore gamer, as in willing to pay lots of money, spend a lot of time, wants the best quality experience, you know, like you have a game like Call of Duty, which is all encompassing with a massive single player game and tons of multiplayer modes and like hits social, hits grinding, hits everything, right? I think that Half-Life Alyx, like, I'm not a huge fan of VR because I just think that like a lot of the experiences you get from it are a bit like, for me personally, like with like the way that my brain works, like it's disorientating. And I don't find like scrounging through areas and picking up loot with my actual hands to be more satisfying than just playing it in like Fallout and just like finding stuff and putting it together. But then again, you know, maybe the cinematics will be much better done, and maybe there'll be like really great level gimmicks. Because Half-Life Valve is amazing at gimmicks, level gimmicks. We look to them a lot when I was working at Blizzard for like good examples of that. But yeah, as a designer, like I think that a lot of this is colored by like my time working at Pocket Gems, at Wargaming, at Riot. I think that like the most like the biggest games are the ones that connect people together. And I think that VR inherently has issues like connecting players to other players because it's so focused on immersing one person's senses. I'm not 100% sure, but like I would bet that Facebook with like their AR department will be a bit more successful in trying to connect players together because that's like sort of their mission statement. Plus, like I know like one of their product directors there, and I think he's a really smart guy. He used to work at Riot in the social side of design. So we'll see. But like as in terms of like developing like super core experiences that like really for lack of a better word, are like orgasmic to look at. I would say Half-Life Alyx is definitely up there. I mean, it's like very, very. It's also like the anticipation of like people want to play Half-Life 3, and you get to play Alyx, and you get to visit City 17, and then there's all these questions, and like they're making all of their Half-Life games free to sort of build up hype. So I think like there's if there was a company that was going to really make a mark on VR and try to optimize every single way to do it, Valve is definitely trying to do that with this, which is kudos to them. And I'm happy for players like you, Brandon. But like as a game designer, I don't work at Valve. As a fan of VR, no, I'm not really a big a fan. So hooray for you!
Well, let me at least ask this question to both of you, right? Who's making a better taking a bigger step forward for VR, right? Is it Beat Saber for the Quest, or is it Valve with their Half-Life Alyx? I mean, which one is making the bigger impact, or is there even a comparison?
I think it's clearly Beat Saber. Like I mean, let's be real.
Oh, that game is so fucking goofy, man.
You know that game's good, bro. You know that game's good, so stop it. And also of course Valve wants to be able to also sell the Index, right? And the Index, how much is the Index? What is it? 1,100, 1,200? But like, what is it?
It's like $1,000
crazy amount.
That they sold out, bro. They sold out. All right.
There's probably only can afford to make 10 of them, right? Like, come on, man. Like, that's just expensive, right? So, like, let's pump the brakes, man. Pump the brakes on the excitement for all of this. So, yeah, like, it's Half-Life. Like, it's a good marketing gimmick. If it was just Joe Blow making a first-person game on that same system, nobody would really care, I think, quite frankly. Mm-hmm. Right? And you're only excited.
Amazing. Yeah. This, okay, I will say this though, Ray, about it. I would gladly play this in like an arcade, a VR arcade. I would. I just can't see myself buying this and hooking this up in my. Like my kids would destroy all of this. Like I don't need. Anyway, no, I'm not trying to rag on you, Brandon, but like, damn, that's like. You know what? I bet you would jack yourself into the Matrix and just say bye-bye to everything. That you would be the first
day one day. For that. See, let me kind of. I guess my background kind of helps with this because I'm the environment artist, right? That's my background, so I'm used to building worlds and wanting to walk through it. So VR gives me that gateway to kind of appreciate the world and being able to look around and be transported over there, right? Beat Saber is nice, right? If I'm like trying to kill time, right? But I'm not rushing home to play Beat Saber. That is not, it's not it. It's like the same equivalent of like, I can't wait to play Guitar Hero tonight, right? It was a fad. It was a time that passed. It has no lasting impact of any memory and experience that I still kind of hark back into when I'm trying to remember, the good old days of that shitty plastic guitar. It's like, no, man, it was, it has no emblem of importance in my history of gaming, right? But Half-Life is a moment that anybody can talk about and you get and you understand. Even if you're not a fan, you're like, I understand the impact, right? No one's going to talk about Beat Saber 5 years from now. Like, that's just the truth of it.
I think you're also underselling the whole rhythm game genre, honestly, because there's still dudes that play
Dance Dance Revolution in the arcades and put it on one player playing on both pad mode and go buck wild, right? There's still dudes that do this.
Yeah, you know why? Because no one's playing with him.
And it's been...
That's why he has to learn to play by himself.
It's been much longer. Yeah. And it's
designed for single player.
5 years. It's been much longer than 5 years, right? And I'm not going to hate on Half-Life Alyx. I think, yeah, it's a great game, whatever, right? But I just, like I said, to say that now VR has arrived because this game shows up, I think is very, very narrow-sighted.
All right. I'm going to have to see what Quest has in store because I still, I know Quest is kind of flying off the shelves. Sure. Well, at least selling more units. But I can't really name a single game besides Beat Saber what's the point?
I'm just going to make a wild prediction right now that somewhere someone is making some like extension to Pokemon Go that you can play on AR glasses instead of VR. And then people are just going to lose their shit because they just need to find like a field of a certain size. Yeah. And then some central server plops down a fucking like AR, like a gym with like a humongous like raid Pokemon just staring at everybody. And everyone's just going to like that. That's what I mean by like, it's going to have that mass multiplayer appeal, but then it's got a huge IP and it's got like, Pokemon gameplay is fairly like shallow overall, but like it can evolve into
a strong
a
IP. I'm pretty sure Niantic is doing something. Yeah.
I think AR's definitely the future, right? Like it's not VR, right? At the scale that we're talking about.
Just let Brandon jack into the Matrix and then,
No, the AR is going to be the jumping off point, but the Matrix, Neo's not wearing AR glasses, bro. It's the Matrix. It's VR. AR has to be the stepping stone, but the VR is the full transportation of the experience. People are going to want to close their eyes.
Brandon's homeboy eating the steak, saying ignorance is bliss, Like
he's going to be,
Why don't you guys go to sleep tonight, all right? And then tell me about your dreams, how you just still in your damn room and there's things pop up, dude. No, your best dreams are where you're transported to somewhere else and you believe in it, right?
I agree. Yeah, it's just that I just don't think the technology is going to.
It's not there yet, right? The end game is VR, but right now it's just in transitional phase to make AR relevant, and it's going to be a few years. But until then, we have Half-Life Alyx leading the way. And Beat Saber is kind of for the old folks. For the old folks home, to get their body moving, I guess.
Yeah, hilarious.
All right, man. So that concludes the hour. I want to thank you, our panel of guests, Ray Graham and Richard Koo, for coming on and discussing these important topics. So this is a monthly podcast. Hopefully you guys will come back. But it was good to catch up with you guys to share your opinions. I love when we disagree, especially how wrong you guys are on certain topics. But I appreciate your opinions. All right, I'll keep it to myself. And people out there can either agree or disagree. That's the whole point of it, right? So I want to thank you guys for spending the time. And that's it. I'll let you guys go.
All right.
Have a good one, guys.
Take it easy, man. Until next time. Peace.